However, I've seen a lot of beautiful brands come and go. They didn't have the longevity in the market because they invested so much before they actually talked to real consumers. And if they didn't know if what they were doing was the right fit for their consumers' needs. And so by doing a very slow and somewhat painful bootstrapping model, you are constantly talking to your customers, and you're, constantly getting rid of SKUs that don't perform well, and then asking your customers, what would you like us to do? What do you want? Right. And that gives you a very high reorder rate, which we have. What we're doing serves such a vital role to revolutionizing our agricultural sector to be more sustainable and regenerative into the future.
Hi, Joni. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's nice to see you.
Same here. How are you?
I'm doing great. Spring is here in Idaho, so it's a very sunny, nice, not so freezing day today, which is great.
Interesting. So, how was your experience with Expo West?
I had a wonderful time at Expo West. I got to go and just enjoy the show. I didn't have to worry about the stress of having a booth to run or any specific work to do, which I was really happy about. I feel like they had a lot more discussion and topics about sustainability and inclusion and diversity, and obviously regenerative agriculture, which is a huge focus for me.
And people were desperately waiting to now start with their travel. So
yes,
the good show.
And just the explosion of creativity out there to see all of the different brands that are, the older brands that have been around for a long time and have grown, and then, the new up and coming brands. It's just always a lot of fun to see what is in the landscape of the, just natural segment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Really high energy.
No, but thank you so much for this. And, really appreciate your time joining on this podcast.
Happy to be here.
Interesting. So, hi viewers, good morning. Welcome to the new episode of Sustainable Future Foods Talk. Today we have with us Joni from the United States, founder of Sattviko Foods. Joni lives in rural Oregon. As a young adult, she pursued the hard sciences, earning a degree in botany from the University of Montana. Joni has always been passionate about healthy eating, cooking, gardening, nature, ecology, travel, and history. She has always seen the daily reality of diet-related disease in her work as an ICU nurse. Joni was able to create incredible grain-based foods from whole grains that were naturally vegan and gluten-free. She set out to build a brand that would not only impact nation's food system by making it healthier and inclusive, but also help to combat the food and agricultural practices that contributed to the current epidemic of allergies in the first place. She sees a huge opportunity in the reinvention of America's favorite foundational foods, making them better for the health of bodies and the health of the planet through regenerative agriculture and innovation. So, Joni, really appreciate this. And, if you can give a brief background about what Sattviko Food does to our viewers.
Yeah, so Sattviko Foods, as you mentioned, and I thought that was a great introduction, really grew out of a need that I saw in our food system after being a nurse. In addition to having a degree in botany and the hard sciences, I also have a degree in nursing, and spent so many hours at the bedside with patients who were very, very ill, doing a lot of education about diet and wellness, exercise, and all the things that we need to be healthy humans. And I really discovered a fundamental disconnect with people's relationship with food. And it's really grown to a huge, explosion here in the US, where grain-based foods are a major source of, kind of contention. There are many people who don't eat any grains at all. They're blaming grains for all of their dietary ills. But then when you look at the world's arable lands, a huge percentage of all farmlands are planted in grains that are heavily chemically farmed, lots of chemical inputs, a sterilized microbiome layer of the soil that is creating, I believe, a significant health impact. So I ended up having children who had dietary allergies as well. And so my first reaction as a mom was like, how do you feed them? I mean, you feed your children. That is something that is so maternal. Women are so passionate about feeding their children and feeding their children the right foods that make them flourish and make them healthy. And my second reaction then was as a nurse and a scientist, where I said, this isn't normal. Like, why are so many children having allergies? And when I did do the research, what the research revealed to me is that this is an epidemic. Allergies globally are an epidemic. The rate in which they are growing is an explosion that has no real explanation, except that there's something wrong with our environment and something wrong with our food that is triggering this massive pandemic of illness. And it can be a very life-threatening thing for many people. So that led me on a path to take a deeper look into our foods, our normal American foods here, because I do live in rural United States, and talking to my patients about what foods they can't live without. Like, they don't want to give up bread. They don't want to give up waffles and pancakes. They don't want to give up cookies and pizza. We've got to figure out a way to make those better for them. And also better for the planet through regenerative agriculture. And I think it's such a powerful notion to think that very basic, humble foods could have a significant impact on health and climate and rural economics.
Absolutely. So, since you have an extensive experience in the CPG industry, especially in the US, so if you suggest a few tips for emerging brands to identify the right target audience, or define customer in the natural food space?
Yeah, so this identification of the consumer archetype, I think, is a topic that is suddenly being reevaluated, because we have like a classic way of approaching who our consumers are. It's a classic marketing approach. There's a lot of strength to that classic marketing approach, where you say, what's their age, what's their ethnicity, what's their professional background, education level, income, etc. That can give us a lot of great data. But I think for certain movements in food right now, in particular, especially like climate impact, sustainability, regenerative, we're going to have to think outside the box a little bit, because I feel like this is a message that resonates through different demographics. And so we're looking a little differently and trying to identify, okay, our customers tend to listen to certain authors, certain podcasts, certain kind of thought leader demographics. And I feel like we'll have a much better success rate going after those as an archetype, rather than just like, oh, she's 31 years old and lives in this zip code and goes to the juice bar. Like, that's a helpful thing, but it's not everything. So and for many CPG brands in the United States, they initially grow on Amazon, and Amazon is a fabulous channel for consumer discovery. However, you don't own the data. Amazon owns the data. So it's very difficult to really figure out who's your purchasing power on Amazon. So
interesting. I understand that you are now working in the millet space and grain space, right? So
yes,
how do you see the new consumer trends in the North American mainstream market? Because I also read from maybe one of the largest distributors in the US that millet based meals are gaining a lot of popularity, and you are also in that right space. So how do you see the consumer trends in the North American market now?
Yeah, so I think that the millets have a huge renaissance coming. And you can see a lot of existing, like, when we look back at history of different trends, you look at quinoa and the adoption into the American plate and in the American cuisine of quinoa, which was a traditional grain of the Andes. And I think that millets can enjoy a similar trajectory and experience, especially as Americans are looking for analogs. So, analogs are really driving a lot of the market right now. We have dairy analogs. So it's like non-dairy milk, non-dairy cheese. We have meat analogs, which are like meats because of people feeling like they need to not eat grains, but then they still feel like they crave them. They still need the fiber. And what we're finding with millets is that there is such a huge body of functional medicinal properties and incredible nutrition that comes from millets that really turns this whole paradigm of grains being bad for you upside down.
Yeah.
And I think that as an analog, as a new wave of enjoying grains, I think millets are going to have a phenomenal next decade of popularity.
Absolutely. And, since these are naturally vegan and naturally gluten-free, so it will take that shape without adding anything extra, right? No artificial thing is required.
Right. Yeah, they're really incredible just as they are. And, much of the research on the functional food properties and nutrition of millets has come out of both India and China. There hasn't been quite as much exploration here in the United States with the nutritional research. And I'm hoping that starts to change soon, but especially with the International Year of Millets with the UN. Thank you, India, for helping get that going. I know it was a global effort, but I feel like India really helped to make that happen. It's going to help to bring more awareness and more research to really getting that nutritional data lined up so that people understand the health impacts of millets. So I know that myself and two other co-founders have just recently launched the North American Millets Alliance, which is it's a social impact group. We're not a for-profit entity. We're an advocacy entity that wants to help work with the International Year of Millets and global thought leaders in millet nutrition and agricultural impact of millets to really help put them on the map and put out some great quality information. One of the things we also need to do is define millets. I think it's kind of confusing. There are so many. And in North America, I think most people, if they're aware of millet, it's proso. That's the only thing they know. But the variety and the complexity of all the different millets that are out there, especially in India, is really impressive.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You could probably speak to that much better than I could.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that diversity lives in India. So
yeah. Interesting. So coming down to my next question, Joni. Sustainability, of course, is an important element in the coming time, and you also at Snacktivist are aggressively working towards it. So, what are those non-negotiables for an emerging CPG brand to consider on the sustainability angle?
Yeah, I think one of the first topics that comes to mind when we discuss this is organics. I'm a big believer in organic food. I love knowing when I eat something that it doesn't have the chemical residues that non-organic and conventional foods do. So I am a believer in that. I've just seen firsthand the effects of agrochemicals on food and on farm workers and what it can do. And so it's been tough for me as a founder to have a line of foods that we do use a lot of organic ingredients, but we're not certified organic for several reasons. One of the main reasons is that we would have had to dedicate to a large importation program where we'd be importing a lot of our primary grains from overseas. And many of these supply chains didn't have the credibility of the certification. I mean, they were certified organic, but when I started to explore and I started to ask other brands that had used these vendors in the past, there were a lot of questionable practices that led to kind of a watered down version of organic. And I wasn't okay with that as a founder. So we decided to really embrace the emerging regenerative agricultural movement, especially those farmers that are doing regenerative ag and they are intentionally going towards chemical-free agriculture. And these are farmers that are, either in my own backyard, because we live in Idaho and Eastern Washington and Oregon, very agriculturally focused region. Or I can get to them by a quick flight and I could go out to the fields and I can look at what farming practices that they're using. I can see how they treat their workers. It's so obvious within a couple of minutes of walking onto a farm when you start encountering the farm workers, when you're with the owner and the farm workers come up and shake your hand and they're like, gosh, it's so nice to meet you. If you're a friend of this guy, you're a friend of mine. He's wonderful. And you can feel the vibe that it's a family. And those are the kinds of farmer partners that we want to work with. And that means more than just organic to me.
Absolutely. This really helps improve the life of farmers as well. And,
Yes.
that is, of course, part of the entire ecosystem where, we look at the inclusive growth.
Absolutely. And the impact on those rural economies, which have been hit very hard by, industrial farming over the last few decades. We have many rural towns that are just ghost towns now because people have all fled to the city, and it's really left a big void culturally in our country. So I'm very dedicated to really investing in those communities and building them up again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So coming down to my last question for this session. So, you have been successfully running Snacktivist Foods for years now. And so, if you can throw some light on how, as an entrepreneur, have you grown the brand in the CPG space?
Yeah, so we have taken the bootstrap model. Being at Expo West, you are immediately confronted with the very VC-backed model of CPG growth, which, honestly, like I have to say, I get kind of starry-eyed when I see it because it's so, like the branding is so perfect and the packaging is so perfect. And the messaging is obviously so engineered by top-notch branding engineers. And part of me is very jealous when I see that. However, I've seen a lot of beautiful brands come and go. They didn't have the longevity in the market because they invested so much before they actually talked to real consumers. And if they didn't know if what they were doing was the right fit for their consumers' needs. And so by doing a very slow and somewhat painful bootstrapping model, you are constantly talking to your customers, and you're constantly getting rid of SKUs that don't perform well, and then asking your customers, what would you like us to do? What do you want? Right. And that gives you a very high reorder rate, which we have. We have the very first customer who ever bought on our website is still a current customer today.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's a woman in Iowa who's a postal delivery person. And she found our brand when we first launched it and still is a loyal customer. So to me, that means a lot. I wish that we had the money to really fuel that fast growth and have that in fantastic branding, but it also has allowed us to build our community equity very substantially on the supply chain side. We're just getting ready to really focus on building that community equity on the consumer side and expand it. But we have very loyal relationships with our farmers. We have deep relationships with our farmers where we know that what we're doing serves such a vital role to revolutionizing our agricultural sector to be more sustainable and regenerative into the future, that I feel like I'm frustrated with the slow bootstrapping model, but when I think about the value we've gotten out of the chance to make those relationships, it may be worthwhile in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. I so get that, and I so agree.
Yeah, but it's been tough. I mean, we are raising money, and when you are a first-time founder, I'm a middle-aged woman, so we're one of the least backed groups, demographics globally. It's just, and COVID really made it tough. I mean, with all the, the effects and the financial uncertainties, and then now we have other geopolitical issues going on that are creating a lot of trepidation in the marketplace and fear globally for good reason. All of those things have just made it that much harder. But the investors that we have brought on are very, very loyal and believe in what we're doing 100%. So that's wonderful.
Interesting. I'm sure, this is so practical and real, this will be really helpful for the budding entrepreneurs who want to, really be there in the CPG industry in the US.
Yeah, it's a tough space. It is.
It's a tough space.
It's an expensive space. And that's what people need to realize, is that CPG is inherently very cash intensive. So you just don't want to underestimate what that's going to be, because if you do, it can run you out of business. You can grow yourself broke very fast.
That's so true. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Joni, for joining in, and really appreciate these incredible responses. And thank you so much for having me. Time.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And good luck with the podcast, and also with your amazing brand as well. So it's great.
Thank you so much, and wish you all the best to make your products widespread across the US market and many more.
Yeah, awesome. Wonderful.
Once again,
let me know how we can let me know if I can be of any help to you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you so much
thank
once
you.
again. All right.
Have a great
day.
evening. Bye.
Bye.